Who would have thought that an ace monster would become one of the top 5 most powerful cards ever printed? Certainly, I did not. But how did this happen? Well, let's find out. The best way to start with an understanding of why this card was banned is to look at what it did, and from there we can break down how this card enables the combos it did. Firewall was used primarily to either extra link, which at the time this card was legal, you could not summon extra deck monsters to the main monster zones, making this wildly more oppressive, or it was used in FTKs because of the easy access to this link 4, along with how ridiculous this card's effect is for accessing whatever you'll need along with infinite loops. So now you may be wondering, how does Firewall enable the resources needed for these typically inconsistent strategies? The biggest problem in this card's design is its second effect. This effect enables you to constantly special summon from your hand as long as a card it points to is either destroyed by battle or in any way sent to the graveyard. Without any restriction on this final effect, you could constantly special from hand, and for some strategies that can float immensely, like Goki, which I'll discuss in a bit, this meant you can just constantly get a search from a monster, then special summon that monster, and continue link climbing. There are a lot of other mediums as well to take advantage of this non-once per turn special summon effect. The second example of utilizing Firewall is with Trickstar and performing the infinite loop Trickstar OTK. Long story short, if your opponent controls an attack position monster with 1700 to 2300 attack, you can attack directly with a Lilybell and recur a Licorice from grave. Then you can bounce the Lilybell back to hand in order to special summon the Licorice. From here you can just crash the Licorice, trigger Firewall's effect, and special summon Lilybell. Then Lilybell will attack directly for 800 again, Lilybell will recur Licorice, Licorice will bounce, crash Licorice, Firewall special Lilybell, and then this process will be repeated until your opponent's life points reach 0. Honestly, at first glance it sounds wildly inconsistent to pull off, but in an actual game it's quite viable, and it's an important interaction to note. Finally, we have the most popular FTK combo this card enabled, that being Endanger FTK. You utilize Grapha to return a Dark World on the field to the hand, then you utilize Cannon Soldier to tribute the Graph for 500, then Firewall will special the previously returned Dark World. You will return again to summon Graph, and you'll constantly repeat this process until once again your opponent's life points reach 0. Two questions that could immediately be brought to mind is 1. What if your deck just doesn't have the setup available? And 2. How's an FTK like the Danger FTK, for example, somehow consistent? This is where Firewall's first effect comes in. This effect enables you to recur monsters from your field or graveyard to your hand up to the number of monsters co-linked. This first effect directly supports the second one in that to constantly special summon, you a lot of the time are going to need more resources, and for some reason it was decided for Firewall to enable that. This is another reason why the Danger FTK even worked in the first place. You'd utilize Dangers and Dark World monsters to constantly put dark bodies on field and keep up in hand size. Then you'll link for something like Curious to dump the Cannon Soldier in the grave. From here, you will set up a co-linked Firewall, typically to 2 links, recur 2 monsters, which one of them will be the Cannon Soldier, and the other one can be whatever depending on if you have a Dark World in hand. Then you special summon the Cannon Soldier and get a Dark World body on field through constant link summoning, and from there, the FTK is quite simple to achieve. This is one of the many examples where the recursion effect is just ridiculous. What makes this card get even crazier is its effect is a once while on the field effect. If you don't understand what this means, it means that essentially, if you're ever able to make Firewall leave the field for something like a link summon, for example, and then you revive Firewall, you can use this effect to recur again. This can be seen in multiple lights. You can revive it from the grave, shuffle it back into the extra with Nightmare Unicorn and summon Firewall again, or even most aggravatingly, put itself back into the extra deck with its effect and special summon it again. If you thought that was it, this card just keeps getting crazier and crazier. The last part of this card that's so broken is the bounce effect, is both on either player's field or graveyard, and is a quick effect. So you're telling me this is the most powerful combo enabler ever printed and then can even be used as disruption if you'd like? This card is what I want to personally call the perfect extra deck monster for combo decks in the modern era. It's unbelievable how much insanity this card creates, and while technically only being as ridiculous as the cards you can summon, you can basically do anything with this card. The only reason this card was not played at some points in his lifetime was because the link pool just wasn't big enough to enable this card being degenerately used until May 2018. Even with such a small link pool, however, during Spiral format, this card was still absurd, enabled extra links, and eventually was limited because of the power of this card for link decks. Alright, with the understanding of why this card was so insane out of the way, let's dive into the events that led to the banning of one of the most powerful cards ever printed. Kicking things off, we have August 2017 and the release of Code of the Duelist, the first set of the Link era, and introduced some pretty key players for the metagame to come, which this set included Trickstar and Goki most notably archetype-wise. We have card releases that we'll see come in and out of the metagame like Topologic Bomber Dragon as an example, but the main star of the show is clearly Firewall. This was one of the few points in time where Firewall Dragon was at 3 copies, and while later in February 2018 Firewall was limited, for now there were some shenanigans brewing even this early on with such a limited link pool. The deck I'm referring to is Dino FTK, a very forgettable strategy that took top 32 at YCS Toronto 2017. While this wasn't necessarily meta impactful, this is the moment we see Degenerate Firewall strategy starting to enter the metagame, and will foreshadow what's to come. Following the September 2017 ban list, Pendulum and True Draco are at the top of the metagame, but there isn't anything that can take advantage of the link for. With this in mind, immediately following that format was the format warping set Circuit Break. Now, this is an important set for the history of Firewall, as this was the set to introduce the first meta link monster archetype that can take advantage of Firewall Dragon, that being Spiral. In fact, what's crazy here is that Firewall Dragon could be utilized as an extra deck enabler, but mainly it was also utilized as disruption with its quick effect bounce. See, the big thing with Firewall at this time was it was the only real link monster based disruption the deck had, and while later on Tri-Gate Wizard would be released, this would not happen as of yet, and so Firewall would be utilized in its place. It didn't really matter regardless because Firewall was at 3 copies, meaning even if you bounce your own resources back to your hand, you can just summon another one and sit on it for disruption for the following turn. As this format progressed, Spiral was hit on the November ban list, making it not nearly as aggressive as before. While some people still opted to go first with the deck, things started to change, and by utilizing Spiral Tough, the deck became more consistent and shifted to a go second strategy. They still played Firewall, but in this case it wasn't as much about extra linking or anything. It was more specifically about either bouncing your opponent's monsters to hand and clearing boards, or it was about making this card for easy disruption. With the format settling down, the February 2018 ban list was on the horizon, and when it arrived, not only was Spiral hit, removing the best link spam option, but Firewall Dragon was limited for it being too powerful in multiple copies. This didn't stop Firewall from still becoming a threat, but it did halt the process. From here until May, Firewall saw very minimal play. To be fair, this should not take away World Chalice winning a YCS in this time utilizing Firewall, but also an Electromite Magician variant known as Adderall Pendulum took advantage of this card as another disruption for the final board. However, with the dust settling on this format and the May 2018 ban list arriving, the meta died down and changed immediately, but what really made this change different was that month's core set. And now, the real moment everything changed in not only the format, but arguably the moment the game changed forever and the real Link era was about to start. This moment is in May 2018 with the release of Flames of Destruction. This set didn't necessarily create new archetypes, but more so focused on staple cards, 2 perfect examples being the Nightmares and Red Reboot. But let's back up for a second though and discuss the Nightmares, because these guys really did change things by creating the link monsters needed for Firewall to start capitalizing. Not only giving the link pool easy access to removal, but made co-linking and eventual extra links much more impressive and harder to deal with. This was the point the link pool was big enough for Firewall to truly become a problem. The enabler for the degeneracy to come was first off Goki, a warrior strategy that I mentioned earlier came out in Code of the Duelist. The deck at that time seemed promising because it constantly kept floating, but also had a payoff in the form of Goki Rematch, an insane extender for the deck to make more link plays. The deck ended at this point on an extra link that capitalized on the Nightmares co-linking protection along with Tri-Gate Wizard as a free negate. The deck was not only crazy consistent with minimal resource input, especially with cards like MX Saber Invoker and Isolde, and had amazing enablers like obviously Firewall, Nightmare Goblin, granting an additional normal, and more, but it was also really difficult to deal with the extra link in general and could be seen as an auto win at some points. Extra linking at this time was even better because this just locked your opponent out of the extra deck in general rather than now where you can still summon synchros, fusions, and exceeds to the field through an extra link. The deck became even crazier and crazier as time progressed, where we received new links to utilize, most notably Summon Sorceress and Topologic Gumblar Dragon, two cards that are banned as of recording this based on their crazy power. Over time, cards were hit because of this deck like the aforementioned Invoker and Goblin, and Goki kept adapting to this. It really shows that through so many hits, Firewall continuously existing was the problem. Now you can all stop referencing the meme smile. Firewall went on to even produce more problems outside of Goki, notably the Danger FTK, an FTK that I did describe earlier, but realistically could have worked with any card that enables a loop like this of infinite special summons or recursion. One notable example of this was with A Assault Core, enabling itself to recur another copy from your grave, special summon it, then tribute and recur again to infinitely burn for 500, because A's effect is not a hard once per turn. What's crazy about all of this, through all the madness with infinite loops and oppressive endboards, is the lack of any hard once per turn effects on Firewall. If both of its effects were just a hard once per turn, it wouldn't have been nearly as degenerate as it was. But because of this terrible lack of restrictions, that is what made this card truly thrive and be as scary as it was. These FTKs should not exist, and especially not in the same format as Goki did. But because Firewall was just so stupidly powerful, it enabled that. It enabled even more degeneracy, where you'll see decks like Zombies extra linking and ABC FTKing. It was ridiculous that this was all possible, but it clearly showed Firewall needed to be banned. And finally, in December 2018, even after getting other cards like A Assault Core limited to 1, Firewall was finally banned. This needed to happen. Regardless of its presence in the anime, it was just too powerful to keep in the game. Some would argue that Goki was actually the best strategy of all time, and I can reasonably see that being the case. It was in tier 0 because of its representation and the fact that people didn't want to play mirrors where they can't play nearly as many hand traps, but this didn't change how powerful the deck really was. And what enabled all of that was once again Firewall Dragon. The dust settled after Firewall's ban, making for a breath of fresh air to play Link monsters without Firewall in mind, but this definitely was not the end for oppressive Link monsters in the game, and we still had some problems to get through like Gumblar Dragon and Summon Sorceress as clear examples. While Firewall has made its presence felt and enabled too many degenerate strategies to work that shouldn't work without it, that's why Firewall Dragon was banned. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date with my newest content if you enjoyed and want to see more. And if you want to join myself and many others in an awesome community, my Discord is a great place to do that. Link is in the description. Finally, if you want to support the channel financially, the best way of doing so is by becoming a channel member or a patron, where you will find exclusive rewards depending on your tier and more content to come. I really hope you all enjoyed, and with that, I hope to see you soon.